Hello, I'm Professor John Breslin from the National University of Ireland Galway. I'm delighted to be here to give this online course on teaching researchers and innovators how to create startups, or TRICS for short. So let me give some background on why we're doing this and more importantly, why is it needed? So I have personal experience of trying to commercialize my own PhD research. My background is as an electronic engineer, and my own PhD was in the area of transformer design. And at one stage, I actually worked to try and commercialize my own research, and it was basically to try and figure out how to sell some software that implemented my algorithms. Um, and this was actually the first version of a flyer I did for the software. And as you can see here, it talks about this system, which was called Magnetic Component Designer. It had a nice little short version, Mac code, a complete design package for transformer applications. And this is somewhat dated. You can see it's from an old version of Microsoft Windows. But it was intended for a person whose job it was to design power applications and to figure out what type of transformer, which, as you may know, is a electronic device for either increasing or decreasing a voltage level in an electronic system. And they were trying to figure out what type of transformer would be appropriate for a particular power application design. So this particular screenshot here shows the layout of the circuit. It shows some waveforms and some values to be taken into account for the design. Anyway, I thought that perhaps this was a little bit underselling perhaps the functions of the software, and I said, well, that doesn't look good enough. Let me try again, and I went back and I found another version of the flyer that I had created at the time. This is version 2 of the flyer. It gives an overview of what the system does. Again, the same thing about Magnetic Component Designer. There's a nice little logo here with, again, a screenshot showing the platform and, again, how it runs on Windows. It talks about the features. You can select automatically these core and winding sizes. You can add custom components. You can evaluate the optimum thicknesses, which is basically the thickness of the winding, which is the wire that's wound around the transformer, and some other calculations. Ultimately, I failed. What was I doing wrong? I was still a young PhD student, didn't really understand very much about how a customer would actually interact with the system, as opposed to thinking more about, as I was doing, the technical specifications and the technical aspects of the system. So rather than talking about the features, which I was doing on the previous flyer, I should have talked about the benefits. I didn't really have a good understanding of who it was for. I had in my head it was for some kind of transformer design engineer, but didn't really understand why they would need it or what exactly their benefits would be in terms of using this, as opposed to how they were doing stuff already. So why is it better than what's out there already? Who exactly was it for? I didn't have a clear picture about the customer, and in the end of the day, it was ultimately too technical. And this is a common thing that I think scientists and engineers do when they're looking at products. They think more about the technical capabilities rather than thinking about the customer and what exactly they want. So, I was pretty good at engineering, probably pretty bad at business. I took maybe one business module when I was in college, and that was the extent of my business knowledge. And I didn't really understand how to talk to humans, because I was much more comfortable in terms of sitting behind my desk and implementing the technology system and making what was, I thought was a cool looking desktop application. But I failed in terms of actually talking to the customer, doing market research, and understanding exactly what they wanted. So I could have done with a book like this. This is Talking to Humans from talkingtohumans.com. You can get this for free online. And I basically failed in terms of understanding the customer and really just focused on a technical implementation. And this is a fun cartoon from the book. It's showing a couple of scientists in the room, and they're saying to somebody else, talk to customers. What do customers have to do with the products we eventually want them to buy? Sometimes this is referred to as the IKEA effect, where we spend a lot of time, invest a lot of time building a product, but we don't actually realize that somebody else doesn't want that product that we spent a lot of time building. And let's scale this up on a European perspective. There's about 2 million researchers in the European Union, according to Eurostat statistics. Almost half of those work in business enterprises, which is quite substantial. You may, again, have a perception of researchers being entirely in academia, but a lot of those are in companies. About 40% are in higher education and about 10% in government. How many of those have no idea how to create a startup, or if they are in a corporate or a business organization, how to create a new product line? Well, that's what we're hoping to solve through this type of course. So all of those people would benefit from a structured process of what we call intra or entrepreneurship for researchers and innovators. One of our successful CEOs locally here in the Galway region from a very successful medtech company called Aerogen was commenting recently on some pitches he had seen from postgraduates. And I think this ultimately ties into what we've been talking about. He said it was interesting that the projects presented were technically and clinically excellent. However, the business and financial models were unfortunately all over the place. And this reconfirmed his view that all science engineering disciplines need a module on entrepreneurship and business modelling. So the question here is, how do we get more research innovations off the shelf and into spin-outs, subsidiaries, and or startups? So this is the aim of a project that I'm involved in called Started. Started project, which is funded under the European Union's Erasmus Plus Knowledge Alliance programme. And the whole idea here is to start with some targeted regional development of entrepreneurial researchers, and then to provide, through what's called the ERSC, or the European Research to Startup Centre, an online version of the teaching that can be available in terms of training researchers how to develop entrepreneurship skills all over Europe. The premise here is that if we can increase the number of R&D innovations that are being transformed or converted into spin-outs, subsidiaries or startups, then we can help with some of the trends in certain European regions where there is actually a high level of R&D activity going on, but there's also a parallel, relatively high level of unemployment in certain regions. So for those regions that have that relatively high unemployment, but also relatively high levels of R&D, how can we get more R&D innovations to convert into these startups or spin-outs or new subsidiaries, and therefore create new jobs, new opportunities, and then allow more people to stay in these regions rather than going elsewhere? The 6 regions we're focusing on range from here in Ireland to Belgium, Italy, France, and Spain. And this is the overall project. As you know, when you're trying to come up with an acronym, it's always good to make it fit to a series of words, and we have startup skills for researchers and innovators in entrepreneurship development, in partnership with some great partners around the European Union, including Translated in Rome, Venture Hub in Spain, IESE Business School also in Spain, the European Young Innovators Forum in Belgium, and Roma Tre University in Italy, as well as ourselves here in NUI Galway, of course. So the whole idea here is to bring together this ecosystem of entrepreneurship, R&D innovation and technology transfer, and essentially give skills to researchers to help them go through their innovation through to transfer into startup, subsidiary or spin-out. We do this through a number of means. As I said, we are doing some direct training in certain European regions. We are then also integrating with the European research community, creating a database of relevant players. And then, as I said, we're creating this online forum where we can deliver content such as this video that you're watching through our online platform. Ultimately, we want to basically get this entrepreneurship skills through to not just the HEI researchers, which is the higher education institutions, as you saw earlier on there, 40% of researchers in Europe roughly, but also the company researchers and government researchers, accounting for another 60% through our online forum. And a couple of work packages here, I suppose, just a quick overview of those in terms of the development of new educational content, which is related to this content you're watching, the creation of this online support system, and then evaluation to make sure that we're getting positive results from the system. Some of our consortium partners, as I mentioned, and thanks to all of those involved who brought this project to life so far. So, first of all, what is TRICS, Teaching Researchers and Innovators to Create Startups, and why do we believe it's so awesome? By the way, you will see on the bottom of these slides an acknowledgement to our friends in MIT. We've adapted some of the content here under the Creative Commons license from the New Enterprises course taught by the wonderful Professor Bill Aulett in MIT. So the mission of this course is, as I said, teaching researchers and innovators how to create startups. According to Bill Aulett, entrepreneurship is a craft that can be taught. Sometimes, and again, coming from an engineering background, scientists and engineers have this perception of entrepreneurship as being some kind of skill that they cannot acquire, that it's a business area that they're not comfortable with. But our aim in this project and in this online course is to enable technical types, scientific types, and anyone really in essence to learn the skills to create what we call innovation-driven enterprises, or IDEs, and to become innovation-driven entrepreneurs. And our mission is really to enable this across all of Europe. So we're planning to educate you in the research innovation-driven entrepreneurship in a manner that will best serve the needs of the European research community. And as I said, to enable European researchers to bring through their innovations through to commercial application in startups, spin-outs, or subsidiaries. And the primary goal here is not to, I suppose, make someone catch a fish, not to have them do it once, but rather to learn the skills that they can repeat this over and over, and ultimately maybe transfer those skills to other people as well. So we want to teach people how to fish in terms of knowing if they want to create a startup or a new unit within a company with a new associated product line. How do you repeatedly go through this process and iterate and improve as you go through it as well? So our aim is to help to create entrepreneurs, not companies or one-off companies, but rather to create people with these skills. And as this quote from Anne Isabella Thackeray Ritchie says, if you give a person a fish, they are hungry again in an hour. If you teach them how to fish or how to catch a fish, you do them a good turn, and ultimately Europe and the world a good turn as well. So our approach is quite practical. We want you to learn by doing. We want to teach you how to fish rather than focusing on catching the fish. You will use readings to apply our frameworks and gain knowledge, experience, and confidence as you work through this. We also want you to learn how to generate ideas both individually and from the people around you. It's important to have teammates who will help you to start your venture, and putting together the right team and the balanced team is an important part of this process as well. And in the end, we want you to be able to create a compelling business plan. And I can say from experience, having done this a number of times with postgraduates, researchers, PhD students, postdocs, it really is enlightening to see how people can create and build that compelling business plan by working through a process such as this that we teach in this online course. And as the saying goes, in preparing for battle, I found that planning is essential, but plans are useless. So you have to be agile in terms of knowing how to adapt, how to understand the plans, not sticking to one particular plan, but being able to basically have a series of steps and a process that you can work through in terms of planning your startup. The course pillars, very much in terms of a mindset, because we want you to, first of all, have what we call the spirit of being an entrepreneur, and really feel passionate about doing this in the first place. So aligning to your own passions, aligning to the way your brain works, but also the passions and spirit of your team as well. We want to give you the knowledge, obviously, in terms of how to do this, but also the capability in terms of being able to work through it. So it's not just information, but rather practical, hands-on capability that you will be learning in this course. And finally, we hope that through this online course as well, you will tap into and connect with the broader community. And that includes ourselves as the course teachers, your people who are taking this course with you, and also the other contacts, mentors, and alumni that you will connect with over the course of the next few months and years. So the key takeaways from what we've talked about so far is that entrepreneurship can be taught, and it can be effectively taught with a structured process, which we will go into more detail shortly. You as a learner should appreciate that there's value in the process itself and the craft of entrepreneurship. It's not just some kind of magic and mentorship and hearing a story about how somebody else was an entrepreneur, but rather a structured craft or a structured process. It's also important to bear in mind that entrepreneurs and companies evolve over time in a Darwinian manner. Fluid teams are essential to optimize the learning process as well as success. And of course, diversity is important in your teams in terms of all aspects. Gender, skills, everything you can think of. The more diverse team you can have, the better, because you will need many different aspects in terms of the teams that you create. This is a picture from our friend Bill Aulett. Keep calm and trust the process. Now, what we do try to encourage in terms of learnings and implementing this process is to start with a new idea. And indeed, you have probably many ideas bubbling inside your head that you're planning to eventually do some kind of startup or new product around eventually. However, for the purposes of this process and maybe interacting with teammates that you may not have necessarily worked with before, having a new idea can be a good starting point, because first of all, you reduce any issues about, well, I own this, I came up with it originally, and I've had this in my head for a couple of years. Having a new idea creates kind of a level that everybody can start from without having less necessarily pre-ownership of something, being bought into something before it's been fully tested. And there's also various processes that we work through in terms of how to come up with these new ideas and to get a team to focus on them as well. So we use what's called the no Winklevi rule. You may have heard of the Winklevoss twins from Facebook lore. So in terms of IP, we try to abide by this no Winklevi rule in terms of this course. So when you submit something, it constitutes public disclosure. If you've got some amazing secret, just disguise it or keep it to yourself. For the sake of this course, we don't necessarily care so much about how the technology works. It can be a black box for the sake of what we're going through here. This is really all about how to create a venture, not about how to refine the technology that venture is based on. So if you're submitting something, for example, as part of a session or an assignment or something else, don't write confidential or proprietary on the assignments or submitted plans, because as we've said, public disclosure for the purposes of this course. If you've got something that you want to keep to yourself, please do so. We may in the future distribute submitted plans to your classmates or to future participants on the course. So again, assume that whatever you submit will be made public for the purposes of future learning of future cohorts. So this is an educational platform. The information produced is done for educational purposes and doesn't belong to anyone. There's no stake in an equity claim because of your work in this course. And after the companies, any companies that may start after this course, start with a clean, as we say, start with a clean slate. And there's an implicit permission here to use in future courses of material unless you tell us otherwise. Now, an important part of any startup or any new venture is to recruit advisors. Sending stuff to us or sharing stuff with your classmates, really, it's great, but it's not sufficient on its own. It's always advised to try and recruit advisors who can give you independent feedback on your work. And this avoids any issues with, I took this online course and I wish I got some more feedback on what we created. By being proactive and seeking guidance from not just ourselves, but from others, you can overcome this issue. We advise you to recruit at least one advisor if you're developing a team. This could be, a domain expert, it may be a potential user or customer of your product. And if it's somebody who has experience in the whole venture creation process, even better. You can use your personal networks to recruit these advisors, or of course you can ask us and we would happily try and come up with a name if we have one. But it's important to show initiative early to identify and recruit at least one person so that there will be continuity over the course of taking this content. So, I talked earlier about a structured process, and we use what's called Disciplined Entrepreneurship. Disciplined Entrepreneurship is a framework developed by Bill Aulett in MIT, and it consists of 6 overall general themes, and within those themes, when you add them all up together, we have 24 steps. So sometimes you will hear us talking about the 24 steps of disciplined entrepreneurship or the 24 steps of DE. Those 6 themes are as follows. The first one is, who is your customer? So this involves developing a very thorough understanding of your customer, the paying customer, and who they are. And the next theme, which links into that, is what can you do for them? So what are their priorities, and what is your product or your service doing for that customer? So again, thinking of theme one, which is very much about who they are. The second one then very much an understanding of what you're actually going to do for them. The third theme is the one on how does your customer acquire your product. So you have to understand exactly what are all of the steps involved in your product being acquired by a customer. Often there's assumption that you put something out there and suddenly somebody buys it. And of course, it's not always as simple as that. In fact, it's never as simple as that. The fourth one is around the financials. How do you make money off your product? This is at both the unit level in terms of the product, but also at the company level. So the overall, let's say the micro and the macro view of the financials. The fifth step then is around how do you design and build your product. And I think this is important to note here, because if you look at the themes, the actual product itself, the creation of it really is taught about more at the end of the process rather than at the beginning, which again, if you think back to how myself, for example, as an engineer or various scientists go about doing things, they often delve straight into the technology without thinking about the customer. And then the last theme is very important, which is how do you scale your business? Again, our focus in this course is innovation-driven enterprises, so it's very important to think about how do you actually scale up an IDE, because you want to be able to go from obviously small to big and to go from local to global. We can zoom in then to the various themes. This is theme one on who is your customer. You can see some of the steps in here, which we will go into in more detail. So the first theme here shown in blue. And the next step then is the golden one there, which is around what can you do for your customer. Now you'll see also some overlap here between the various steps. So it isn't simply a matter of going through 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 and 6 for... Now you'll see here as well some overlap between the steps. It isn't simply a matter of going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for theme 1, but actually there's an interleaving of the various steps between the themes. For example, number 9 here, which is the next 10 customers, is actually part of theme number 1. And again, you will also see some arrows between the different themes as well in terms of the steps. So you may say, well, actually I've gone to step number 9 here. I've tried to find 10 more customers and I figured out there's actually a problem here. I need to go back to my persona, which is the customer profile, and figure out if I need to iterate and then go back forward again. So you'll see various movements back and forth here through the steps. And then we move on through the other themes. Again, you can see here different color coding. We've got acquisition of a customer, we've got making money from the business, and so on. So that's our quick overview of 24 steps, but of course we will be going into these in a lot more detail. And an overall view of these all together, and as I say, we're going to work through each one of these steps in quite a bit of detail for each of the themes to give you the skills you need to work through this whole process. So the textbooks which we have for this program are called Disciplined Entrepreneurship and the Disciplined Entrepreneurship Workbook. And these are the ones, the core books that give you information on the whole disciplined entrepreneurship process. These can help you to substantially increase your odds of success. They give you structure in terms of the various critical elements in starting a company. Importantly, they give you a common language that you can use to express your startup or your new service, new product ideas to others. So whether that's your classmates, your teachers, your investors, if you're in a corporate and you're trying to raise funding from your line manager, this gives you a set of terms and a framework for expressing the core essentials of your startup idea. It also helps you to identify questions and weak points, and indeed, we often have various assumptions that we make when we are developing a startup idea, and this helps you to prepare for, I think, and also answer any questions around those assumptions. Ultimately, as you saw in the 6 themes, you want to be able to deliver and execute a particular product, scale it, and then raise funds to make it happen. So we'd advise you, if you can, to read through this entire Disciplined Entrepreneurship book as soon as you can, and then review each step prior to watching the corresponding videos in this online course. And I'd also say for the started project target countries, we also are pleased to let you know that the textbooks are available in our target countries' languages of Spanish, Italian, and also in French. Now, there's various additional elements. We will be touching on some of these to a greater or lesser extent, but we will also give resources in terms of finding out more. These include how to ideate and build your team, carrying out primary market research, issues in terms of founding a company. How do you do your primary market research through digital experimentation, product development and strategy, and then other techniques in terms of increasing the value you get from a customer, but also how you can reduce the amount of money you spend on getting a customer. Relevant elements on financial literacy, leadership, fundraising, and also presentation skills. So the teaching style for this online course is very much a combination, as we've mentioned, of theory and practice, our knowledge and our hands-on capability. We will be presenting various exercises over the duration of this course, and you will have input from your mentors, and also you need to put it together, of course, with your team in terms of that final business plan. The other parts of the team, while you have us obviously as your teachers, we have a great set of expertise and experience in terms of the people delivering the course. You also, as we've mentioned, will have the opportunity to interact with us, your teammates, alumni, and also the advisors that you will gather over time. And we also hope to have a number of guest lecturers and speakers providing content to this course. We believe this is an awesome set of content for you as a researcher or innovator trying to develop your technology innovation into a commercializable startup or spin out or subsidiary. And of course, the most important part of the team is you, high achieving researchers and innovators from various domains. This is one of the valuable assets, of course, going forward. You will be able to interact with all of the yous out there from various areas. This is your community or your home. So that's probably enough for now about the general background. We're going to go into a little bit more detail shortly. Just want to say a few things first. As you go through this process, you are talking about an idea to get the process going, but really key part is the team. Idea is great, and it's part of the whole pie, as we say, but the team is something that's quite important. You need to have a team that has a common vision, shared values, but also, as we said, in terms of a diverse set of complementary skills as well. And this is a picture. I talked about the pie. This is the entrepreneurship success pie. And as you will see here, the idea is actually quite a small part of the pie. Indeed, the team is a very important part. How you execute the whole process is, again, another huge part. And understanding the market then is a very substantial part. And being able to get in touch with that market instead of assuming the customers will be suddenly appear. So the advice is to find a good idea to get things started. It might not be yours, it might be somebody else's. It's really just to focus you and get you working towards and through the process. Most of all, find a great team to work with throughout this online course. So I mentioned about the passion of the team. It is good to work on an idea that your team is excited about. You'll enjoy this a lot more if you're working on something that you really have an interest in. You'll get a much better understanding of the material if you're thinking about it in terms of a team idea that you're excited about. So I would take the ideation and team formation phase seriously in terms of how to coalesce towards a certain team working on a certain idea. It can really determine your experience with this. If you find for some reason that your idea hits a dead end, don't be too shy to change it midway through the course. That's not a big problem. Some of the most successful teams make complete switches even as late as 2/3 of the way into the course. You can, of course, seek early advice from your mentors, and ideally by dropping us an email to schedule an office hour appointment. And aligned to that passion, there's no point in really presenting a business plan that your team does not believe in. If you think about it and you're trying to You've probably seen many presentations where the person was not passionate about the idea, and it comes across. And if, for example, the 24 steps of DE or Disciplined Entrepreneurship serve to invalidate your venture's idea, your presentation should demonstrate how you use them all to reach that conclusion. You can still gain value under this scenario. You're still understanding and learning from the process. Just keep your instructors in the loop and agree with them not to pursue a different idea. So next I'd like to talk about the objectives of the TRICS course, or Teaching Researchers and Innovators How to Create Startups. So what is this, and what is this course? What's it all about? Why are you taking it? And what should you expect over the duration of the course? So the course objective is to learn how to identify, organize, and build a new enterprise. In this course, we don't just study entrepreneurs, we become entrepreneurs. We don't just create a company, we teach people how to create companies. It's my belief that this may be one of the most important courses you will take as a researcher or innovator. The reason for this is that it's not just about learning the skills and knowing how to create a startup or a spin out or a subsidiary. It's actually understanding what makes a company tick. Because even if you're not the eventual CEO or co-founder, through this course you will have a better understanding of why you are designing or working or building a particular product and what the customer wants from that product. So I would think of it as being a fundamental course, as essential as, for example, a statistics course you might have taken in your undergraduate degree, in terms of having that understanding. Because whether you end up in academia, whether you are a musician, whether you are developing a technology product, understanding what the customer wants is very, very important, and this course will help you to do that. A little bit about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, because again, we know that not everybody ends up in startups. A lot of people working in corporates still need to develop new product ideas and to understand what customers want those products. So the same principles can be applied here, whether you are a single entrepreneur trying to launch a new venture, or you're working in a multi-billion-dollar corporation who wants to achieve their goals, their future growth through new innovation and entrepreneurship techniques. The same fundamentals can be successfully applied. So a little bit about the things you need to start a successful new venture, and this ties back to the entrepreneurship pie we had earlier on. There's an idea, which is the starting point. It comes from you and your team. We want you to be a pirate or swim the other way. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later on. There's the team, which is hard and takes time and work, but even if you don't get the ideal team in place straight away, you can also plan for how you would grow and improve that team over time. So there are some key considerations here in terms of the passion, which we've talked about already, the values of the team, heterogeneity, diversity, the size, the types of skills you want, and so on. And then there's the process, and this is what we're teaching you in this online course using MIT's 24 steps. And this is more along the lines of, instead of being a pirate who is very passionate about a particular idea, it's about being structured and more like a Navy SEAL. So for this online course, we are going to try and cram as much experience into this as possible. Ultimately, we want you to be able to present a business plan that will be about a company or an entity that has a market cap of 30 million euro within 3 years of launch, or sales of 10 million. So it's quite ambitious, but we want you to be able to think of a reasonable scale. We're not talking about billions here, but we are talking about a sizable amount of sales and customers. We will have various cases and readings throughout the course, but again, the idea is to pick up your lessons and insights through doing. The logical flow of the process is shown here. This is, I suppose, working from the top there. At the top of the pyramid is titled there. You'll see BP+. This stands for your ultimate output, which is the business plan, and then the various elements that make that up: the financials, how you execute your business model in terms of pricing and so on, the product itself, the market and the customers, yourselves in terms of your team, and then of course your idea. And again, you can see some elements here of this entrepreneurship success pie: idea, the team, the market, execution, and so on. So a little bit about the company that you start for this online course. We want the company to be an innovation-based one. So we'll talk a little bit later on about the difference between SMEs and IDEs, Innovation means that there's some kind of innovation, scientific or technology or otherwise at the core. It shouldn't be a consulting company or some kind of um, company that doesn't have a product or a service. The company may or may not require resources beyond your control, whether that's intellectual, IP, financial, or otherwise. We want to have an economically sustainable and growing business, and ultimately summarized, as you saw on the previous slide, by this business plan. If you can manage to have customer traction and a demo by the end, even better. This sounds difficult, however, I think you will be pleasantly surprised. As an example, I attended a presentation by some 16-year-olds last week who developed a company pretty recently. They already have sales of thousands per month. So with the right attitude and effort, you can of course get customer traction for an innovation-driven enterprise that you're passionate about. Business plans. We had this quote, you may have seen it before. In preparing for battle, I have found that planning is essential, but plans are useless, from Eisenhower. And again, it's good to have a plan, but to be able to understand how to improve and to replan and to continue your planning is, of course, it aligns somewhat, I suppose, to the idea of catching a fish and getting a fish. Being able to catch the fish and be able to get the fish once. So rather than being able to just produce a one-off business plan, to be able to understand the set of skills that allow you to continuously create new business plans for new opportunities, or if the idea isn't right, to be able to evolve a new business plan for a new idea. Why start a company as opposed to joining somebody else's? Sometimes people will just want to control their own destiny rather than having to ask somebody else for a job. They want to be able to create a fantastic job for themselves. It's the attacker versus defender strategy. The attacker is often thought about in terms of making all the money and having all of the fun. And starting companies is probably less risky now than it was in the past. There's a lot more opportunities, a lot more frameworks, a lot more structures, and a lot more capital available to start companies than there would have been, say, 20, 30 years ago. Of course, ultimately, you can change the world. You can make something happen that doesn't or hasn't previously happened before. And again, another reason is that really nothing will use your talents more than starting a company. It does require a very interesting set of skills to be developed to make it happen, and ultimately it is a lot of fun. So, what if you don't have a good idea? And this is often a question people ask when they think about this process. They really want to learn how to create a startup, but they don't have anything kind of lurking in the back of their minds in terms of what to do. So there are various approaches to help with this, and which we will talk about. Ultimately, you want to be able to get not just yourself, but others excited about something that doesn't yet exist yet. So it might be this idea or a dream that you want to have people coalesce around and get others to believe in something that you're going to create in the future. The process will help with this. It'll identify or help you to identify sooner rather than later that an idea is not a good one. We've talked about the important parts here in terms of building the team, execution, and scaling, which a lot of this comes from making sure that you not just think about one market, but you can think about follow-on markets as well. So I've mentioned the core texts, Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Aulett, and then the follow-up book, the Disciplined Entrepreneurship Workbook also by Bill Aulett. These books can really help increase your odds of success and give you structure in terms of what you need to create a new product or service. So again, the broader picture, I suppose, in terms of things you may want to know about, and again, having been through the startup process myself quite a few times, it's difficult to have the full understanding of all aspects, whether that be the business or the technical or so on. But it is good to have an understanding about all of these aspects, whether it's design or sales and so on, because whether you decide to do them or not yourself, you will then be able to communicate with the others who are doing them. So we'll talk later on about the various parts that you need to make up a team, but having an awareness of how those parts work is, of course, very important. So do your homework as it's assigned. The textbook covers the 24 steps very well, and we do expect you to have read it. Start writing down ideas for new businesses, as many as you can. Don't worry if you don't think they are great. More is better. You can filter them out later on and pick your best idea. And we'll talk about later how to generate even more ideas and filter them later on in this course. And we will give an overview of the 24 steps and provide guidance on how to do your primary customer and market research to validate if your idea is actually a good one or not. Every couple of weeks, we do expect you to produce a different part of the plan, whether that's the market analysis, the sales and marketing, and so on. And you need to basically fix the parts that need to be fixed after reviews. The final plan then is the parts put together, and then each team should be able to pitch all or the essential parts of their plans to mentors, the academics and other coaches throughout the online course. As we've said, recruit advisors relevant to your domain and your team, and a great idea is to take an entrepreneur to dinner. Again, this is something you can do yourself. There's no better way to learn about startups than from somebody who's gone through the process, and very few people are, well, first of all, they want to help. They want to help other entrepreneurs to success, and few would turn down the opportunity to have a dinner with interesting future startup founders to give skills and also to hopefully inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. Is this a hard or easy course? Well, it does demand creativity. You need to be willing to leave your comfort zone and go talk to the customer, like I talked about before when I was doing my PhD and trying to commercialize my own PhD. I didn't go and talk to the customers. I've since learned, of course, that this is in fact, one of the most important parts of the process. You need to listen and watch them very carefully, not advocating your technology, but empathizing with what they want. Remember, we don't study entrepreneurs, we become entrepreneurs. These companies that are successful will have a balance of technology, business, passion, and sales. You really only learn by doing, and this is another quote from another famous president, Teddy Roosevelt. It's not the critic who counts, the credit belongs to the one who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who at the worst, if one fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that one's place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.